Welcome, guys. So, if you are interested in regenerative leadership, regenerative business, you're in the right space. I'm going to get a quick show of hands. Who feels like they have a grasp on the term regenerative? Put your hand up. Keep your hand up if you think this is a good term to describe the goal, the objective of where we want to go. Is regenerative the term we want to focus on? Great. And put your hand up if you think, actually, we might misuse it. There are tensions, there are some contradictions. Anyone with some skepticism about regenerative? Wonderful. Well, we are going to touch on all of this. We have an amazing session lined up for you. I'm going to describe this session as a sandwich. We're starting with some gourmet bread in Laura Storm, who's going to open up this session with a short talk on exactly what we mean by regenerative leadership with some great examples. In the middle, we have some organic, some fair trade, some locally sourced filling in the middle of our sandwich. And we have Flavia, we have Sarah Marie, and we have Patrick, who will be talking about the various aspects of this, from being an entrepreneur to an investor, to looking at business education, to looking at activism and personal leadership. And we're going to finish off with the final bit of our sandwich, Ecosia's CEO, Christian. It's going to be exciting. Now, the main thing I want to introduce to you here is that the term regenerative has so many definitions. It includes making sure that it's an economy that restores, renews, and revitalizes. Now, that inspiration comes from nature, because that's what nature does. There is no waste in nature. Nature is focused on rebuilding, on revitalizing. But this is extremely different to the world of business, to the world of finance, where we have to grow market share, profits, earnings, exits, dividends. So the two worlds are going to collide here. Regenerative leadership in regenerative business. With that said, I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Laura Storm. She's been an activist since she is 8. She has built amazing organizations like Climate Change Summit, Sustainia, and more recently, Regenerators. She's co-author of the bestseller, Regenerative Leadership. Please welcome to the Change Now stage, Laura Storm.
Thank you. It's exciting to be here. Let's start by all of us getting up, because this exciting 3-day summit has just begun. We have traveled from near and far, and we thought it would be nice to just start with a quick grounding meditation, because regeneration is also about feeling good and allowing ourselves to be regenerative human beings. So the invitation is, if that feels good for you, to start by closing your eyes and turn the gaze inward and put your right hand on the area of your heart and the left hand on the area of your belly. And start to breathe deeply into your belly area. Start to breathe deeply. And send yourself some love, some nourishment, gratitude, for having traveled here to meet with change makers from all over the world. And give yourself some nourishment in between, some breaks, some pauses, to ground, to reflect, integrate, so you don't extract yourself while you are here. Bring your breathing with you on this journey. And see if you can calm every cell of yours and ground through your feet. Connect to Gaia below us, the planet that we are lucky to share. And when you're ready, open your eyes and stretch a little. Maybe shake that body. Welcome. So I will share a bit about, just for 15 minutes, what is regenerative leadership? Why do we need it? What is it all about? Before we have an exciting panel discussion about this. So most of you are sustainability professionals, so I guess I don't need to take you through in great depths that we are living through the great acceleration. Since the 1950s, everything from GDP to urban population to ocean acidification to CO2 emissions have been on a very steep increase. We know this, and we know the severe impact that this has on us and our planet. But what is missing from this is the fact that not only have we extracted outer ecosystems, we have crossed 6 out of 9 planetary boundaries that we cannot cross if we want to avoid collapse. We have also extracted our human bodies. We have never been as severely burned out, stress, suicide levels are on the rise, burnout, depression. All of this is interconnected. It's interrelated. It's part of the same challenge. We have extracted our own inner ecosystems as well as Gaia's ecosystems. So our approach, and part of the regenerative approach, is to address this simultaneously and come back to life and apply the logic of life, the wisdom of nature. So the sustainability approach, in my opinion, is not going to cut it. SDGs has served us really well to give us a shared language. But if we want to move from the extraction and being extractors into becoming regenerators, into becoming a regenerative force on this planet, we need to align our ways with the only system that has stood the test of time, which is living systems. We need to start understanding how we can align our ways with life instead of going against life. And that is the essence of regenerative leadership, of regenerative business. We need to shift our level of consciousness. New kind of strategies, new 10-step formulas is not part of the regenerative era. It's not part of the regenerative movement. We need to shift our level of consciousness. We need to learn how to become guardians and stewards of life. So the regenerative business lies on the essence of life. We need to create conditions conducive for life in everything that we do, in how we do business, how we lead, how we redesign societies, systems, and structures. It needs to be based on how can we create conditions conducive for life to thrive. So there is this law of life. There is this inherently regenerative wisdom that is part of all life. Life bangs and thrives thanks to diversity. Life depends on strong, interconnected relationship. Life is constantly changing and responding, constantly evolving. Life depends on strong flows of energy and matter. And life is part of a greater interconnected web of life. That's part of that kind of formula that we need to align our ways with. But how can we apply this to leadership? How can we apply this to how we do business? There are many different approaches, but one way is the regenerative business DNA. And it's covering living systems design. How can we tap into fields like circular economy, biomimicry? How can we learn to design our products and services in a way so they align with nature's patterns, forms, functions? Those are fascinating fields already out there for you to explore deeper if that piques your interest. So how can we learn from nature and how we design? Tap into biophilia and how we design our environments, our cities, our buildings. Living systems culture. How do we create thriving, abundant, responsive organizational cultures? Not fear-based, toxic, mechanistic, hierarchical machines. But how do we create living, abundant, responsive organisms? Should be the model we design on. And thirdly, living systems being, what are the qualities we want to nurture within ourselves, in our partnerships, in our organizational cultures? So a regenerative approach is, as I said, it's not a rigid formula. Regenerative, they are weavers of a new era. They are weavers of a new era. So they are not responding to a very rigid formula, but they understand, how can I create conditions conducive for life? In my relationships, in my organizational design, in my products, in my services. So regenerative leaders, they see their organization as an organism, as a living system. It has an inner, an outer, and it has an ecosystemic effect. So a regenerative organization is mapping their living system. They understand that everything from the materials they use in their production, to how they treat their employees, how the culture is based on values that feels nourishing, it's all interdependent, and it all has an impact on society and on life, on Gaia. So let me be very concrete and give you a concrete example. So everything a business does has an impact on the world. So the water that comes into an organization, the food that gets served in the canteen, everything has an impact. And the concrete example I want to give you is through a company that I have worked with. They started a regenerative journey back in 2020. It's a shoe brand company called Vivo Barefoot. And they are not perfect. And I want to put out a strong disclaimer that I don't believe that the perfect regenerative business exists yet. But there's 1,000 of examples of companies that are on the journey. So let's use this as a concrete example. So Vivo Barefoot, they started their journey in the middle of lockdown back in 2020. So we actually started by coaching the entire organization online. And we coached them on regenerative leadership qualities. What does it mean to deeply listen to each other? What does it mean to cultivate nourishing relationship? What does it mean to work in alignment with nature? How would their organization look like differently if they started to be designed on the model of a living system? So they started to test these things in 2020 in nature. They started to test different ways of talking to each other, different ways of interacting. And when we started to work with that organization, there was a lot of toxicity, a lot of stress, a lot of burnout. So they started by creating homeostasis within the organization, within the living system. And then they started to see to map their entire ecosystem. What kind of impact do we have? We use plastic in our production. How about we shift that? Instead of virgin plastic, we start to invest in a bio-based alternative. How about we start investing heavily into regenerative agriculture, because our leather that we use in our production needs to have a positive impact? How about we start to do a leasing model for kids' shoes that are only using their shoes for 6 months? How about we start doing a repair service so you can repair your shoes and you can buy used shoes? How about we create a movement of people all over the world that are kind of passionate about being part of a movement, reconnecting yourself to nature? So all of these things started to blossom from the inside out that has had massive ecosystemic ripple effect. That's part of the kind of mindset shift that we see in many organizations today. That kind of level of awareness that I'm actually part of a greater interconnected web of life. And what we do within this living system has a massive impact. And inner, outer, ecosystemic is part of the same thing. So the employees started to see themselves as part of a living system rather than part of a machine. They started to listen differently to each other, and they started to test, experiment, explore to a greater extent than they had done before. And it has had a massive impact. So in the first year alone, profits increased by 36%. At the same time as their happiness level, they use something called the happiness index. Maybe some of you are familiar with that. But their sense of well-being, their happiness level internally increased also by 36% in the same year. The great thing about this company is they communicate very transparently in their annual reports. So for those of you that have an interest in this, I recommend reading their annual reports dating back from 2020. They have dedicated themselves to also communicate all of their many failures, where they have done really wrong, where they have succeeded. So they have that level of transparency so other companies can follow in their footsteps or tap into inspiration from them. Another example that I wanted to give is a company that is very far from being regenerative. But I wanted to include this as an example of the courage that is needed at the time that we are in right now. So in the summer of 22, a very brave head of sales of Mercedes-Benz Vans quit her job because she was fed up by the rigid, mechanistic, toxic culture. She quit her job, and she had been with the organization for 17 years, was very highly liked on an executive track. So her boss was like, "What can I do to make you stay?" And she bravely said, "I want to help lead the way into the regenerative future for this company. I want to help steward a regenerative culture." So he gave her a little budget to do a pilot the first year. They measured on some key metrics in terms of job satisfaction, well-being, efficiency, etc. And all of those metrics had improved in the first year between 67 to 85%, which meant that a momentum was built. And now they're doing a bigger pilot in 17 markets, 700 people are involved, 80 top executives are involved. It's really gaining traction. And what is beautiful about this, it's called New Ways of Working, the project. It's not very known yet. But what is really beautiful about this project is that it's led from bottom up. The employees call themselves a guerrilla movement of love. So they are too trained in ecosystem facilitation, seeing the organization as a living system. What impact do we have on the outer world? But also, how can I take care of my inner ecosystem? How do we collectively start to design a cyclical approach to life where we honor the deep need for a reflective winter? We don't have time for more cases, but I just want to stress that it is a growing movement, a powerful growing movement of regenerative businesses that are stepping into this space. And what they see themselves is ecosystem facilitators, stewards of life. And I launched Regenerators almost 10 years ago now, so I've worked on this transition for quite a while, and before that it was helping companies transition to sustainability. And the one thing that is the main barrier for this transition to happen is not solution technologies, political frameworks, or financial mechanisms. The main barrier that I see in people again and again, especially among executives, is the fear of death. It's a fear of letting go. It's a fear of not having all the answers. It's a fear of stepping down that corporate ladder and entering uncharted territories where suddenly you do not have all the answers. You leave the linear, mechanistic frameworks of yesterday and enter into something where you need to tap into a completely different vocabulary and way of being on the planet. And that's terrifying. So the way that I have spent the past year and a half is to work with hospice workers, understanding death ceremonies in different cultures, because we need to be really comfortable holding space for the energy of death. Something needs to be let go of, something needs to die if we are serious about birthing a new regenerative era. We need to tap into our own ego and see where do I need to let things go that is not serving life? And how can I create conditions conducive for life? But as any metamorphosis, it's super scary. Scientists can detect hormones of fear when the caterpillar is going into the chrysalis phase and entering that metamorphic state. It's super scary, but it's needed. and it's needed for all of us that are present here. Implementing solutions and technologies are not going to cut it alone. We need to hold space for a process of death so new life can emerge. We need to come back to essence. We need to shed layers of colonial conquering, power over, dominating, rigid mechanistic ways of being on this planet. We need a decolonial approach. We need to honor indigenous wisdom. We need to be in right relationship, reciprocity. And we need to tap into this energy that we started out with, the energy of the heart. We need to tap into our own courage. Courage comes from the Latin word, speak your truth through your heart. And if you have forgotten everything I've just said, please take this with you. Dare to speak your truth from the heart. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura.